Well, hey there, folks. My name is Ryan Schaefer, and welcome to this video conference brought to you today by BigMarker.com. We're going to be talking about the wonderful world of amphibians today, but before we do that, I do want to point out a couple things about Big Marker that allows us to interact as much as possible. You can see all of my listeners right here, but we certainly have the ability for each and every one of you to raise your hand by pressing this icon right here. So if anytime you have questions, go ahead and raise your hand by using that icon. You also can communicate with me by using this chat window right here. It is also possible for you to use your microphone and speak into it, but I have to let you know, or you have to tell me when you'd like to speak up so I can give you the microphone. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started and talk about the wonderful world of amphibians. Amphibians are a class of animals that I find very fascinating. There's actually 3 different kinds of amphibians in the world today. They represent about 4,000 species worldwide. As you can see in the chart, we do have the largest group by far, of course, that are the frogs and toads. The second largest group would be the salamanders, and of course the little-known Caecilian group is the kind of amphibians that most people don't know about, and there's just really not that many in the world today. They do look like a worm, but they are not a worm at all. They're more closely related to a frog or salamander than anything else. There are some characteristics, though, that amphibians have uniquely. And that's why they are considered amphibians, as we'll find out. The first characteristic, of course, that you're seeing is that they are vertebrates. That refers to the fact that they do have an internal skeleton with a backbone. Their skeleton is going to be a little less advanced than something like a bird or mammal, because you do find some fusion. In general, their bones are going to be a little bit more simpler. There's going to be less bones in an amphibian skeleton. But no matter what, every amphibian that you come across will have a backbone. Amphibians are also ectothermic. This is actually a very important concept to understand. It refers to the fact that they depend upon the sun's energy to regulate their internal body temperature. So, if an amphibian is cold, they need to find a nice warm rock or nice warm spot somewhere near water to help them stay warm. But of course, if they are getting too hot, they need to get away from the sun, find somewhere where it's shady, so they can stay hopefully at the right temperature, depending on what kind of species you're talking about, so they can move and be just at the right temperature so they can survive. But because of this, because they are ectothermic, many times you're going to find amphibians that are nocturnal. That is, that they are most active at night. And that's actually a pretty good survival strategy, because many predators are sleeping at night. So if they are nocturnal, they do have better chances of surviving for longer and longer periods of time. There are other certainly characteristics of amphibians that we have to learn about, though. They do have special skin. It's actually a very thin, permeable skin, and it is a skin that actually allows them to drink water. You're never actually going to find a frog or a toad or a lizard, actually not a lizard, but a salamander drinking water through their mouth. They depend upon their skin to drink for them. Of course, their skin also allows oxygen transfer as well. So while amphibians do have lungs, their lungs are certainly assisted by that thin, permeable skin, in the fact that oxygen can be absorbed that way as well. One of probably the most important characteristics of amphibians is, of course, that they shed their skin. That's not the most important characteristic, but many people don't know about this. They do shed their skin. Sometimes they shed it all at once, but sometimes they shed in pieces. And many times, this is kind of funny or gross to tell the kids, but they do eat their shedded skin, because it does provide important nutrition for them, especially when after they are hibernating. Okay, so let's get into probably the most important aspect when it comes to amphibians. It's the fact that they lay their eggs in water. This is a characteristic that all amphibians share. It's because that their eggs do not have a hard shell to contain moisture from not getting back out. When we talk about birds or reptiles, they lay eggs that are covered in a hard shell, and that means they can basically lay that egg wherever they want to. But in the case of amphibians, their eggs do not have hard shells, so they must have eggs that are laid in the water. And as these eggs are laid in the water, they do go through a process of metamorphosis, and that is probably the most important characteristics when it comes to amphibians. It's the fact that young amphibians aren't going to look like their adult selves. Their bodies will go through many changes. As a matter of fact, the word amphibian means double life in Greek, because amphibians have a life in the water when they're young, and then of course they live the rest of their life on the land. So in this case, we have a frog that's going through the process of metamorphosis. The first stage is, of course, a tadpole. Eventually, they grow legs. Their tail becomes shorter and shorter. They grow front legs, and at this point, they can transition from the water to the land because they've been able to develop lungs. Of course, in the water, they have gills, but once they are developed enough, they have lungs that can breathe air just like you and I. So this is the process of metamorphosis. Here's some more specific pictures of metamorphosis in a frog. Here's some even better pictures of a tadpole. Of course, once that tadpole is all developed, it can emerge from the water. It might still have a little bit of a tail, but in this case, we call this stage a froglet, and it basically looks like an adult, only with a tail, and eventually that tail will fall off. So metamorphosis is probably the most important characteristic when we talk about amphibians. I do want to show you this chart because it is a very important chart to understand, especially when we get to the end of it, because knowing the characteristics between frogs and toads are important. Certainly frogs have moist, smooth skin. Toads have dry, warty skin. But what I really want to get to is the fact that amphibians sometimes have some interesting ways of defending themselves. In this case, a frog must have some mild poison glands. Some toads also have some mild poison glands that secrete this not really tasty mucus on their skin, and to a predator that's not going to taste very good at all. So when we look at things like this is actually the Olympus salamander, has very bright yellow spots that warn predators to warn them, saying you probably don't want to eat me because when you eat me I'm not going to taste very good. Pretty interesting way of protecting yourself from predation, but in this case we see it to the nth degree because we have the poison dart frog, which is actually able to secrete toxin that is very, very poisonous. It actually can kill certain animals. So amphibians do have an important adaptation sometimes in the fact that they use these really bright colors to warn predators to stay away, because if you're going to eat me, you're going to be in for a surprise because I have this mucus on my skin that can be either really toxic or even poisonous. So with that said, I figured it'd be good if I share my screen with you, and I want to play a video. In this video, you'll get to see an actual biologist telling you a little bit more about an African bullfrog. So let me go ahead and pull that for you, and I hope you guys enjoy.
Its scientific name is Pixecephalus adspersus. It is found in eastern and southern Africa. It likes subtropical and tropical dry shrublands. Unlike most other species of frogs, the male is actually larger than the female. The male can be up to 9.5 inches to 10 inches in length, and the female up to 4.5 inches. A very interesting fact about this particular bullfrog is the amount of parental investment the male puts into the tadpoles. During mating, the female likes to lay her eggs in ephemeral bodies of water. Ephemeral bodies of water don't tend to last very long, and therefore the male will use his snout to dig tunnels to the next ephemeral body of water for the tadpoles so they don't dry up with the water. This body of this frog, as you can see, is very broad, and they have a short, narrow snout, and they actually have teeth-like projections on their lower jaws, which is generally uncommon in frogs. This African bullfrog can lay up to 3,000 to 4,000 eggs in shallow water, and they can hatch in as little as 2 days after being laid. The African bullfrog is carnivorous, and it will eat just about anything it can fit into its wide jaws. It likes to eat insects, though, and small mammals. This bullfrog is very interesting because of one of its special adaptations. It lives in dry, arid climates, and in order to survive droughts, the bullfrog can go into a state of dormancy. It can hide underground after creating a cocoon that is watertight. This cocoon keeps the specific bullfrog from losing its water, and it loses half the water that another frog does who doesn't have a cocoon. During this state of dormancy, it gets its water and hydration from water that it stores inside of its bladder. Once the rainy season begins again, the moisture will seep through the ground and will moisten the cocoon, wakening the frog from dormancy, and the frog may even eat its cocoon for nourishment. That's an African bullfrog.
Alrighty, so I hope you guys enjoyed that. I also wanted to bring up the fact that there are some things happening with amphibian populations. They are disappearing at an alarming rate, and I did want to highlight this PDF file where a researcher found that ultraviolet radiation and toxic chemicals are certainly contributing to amphibian population declines. So there is a lot of research going on as we speak, trying to determine what the reasons are why we are seeing a very large decline in amphibian populations. So it is an issue that we are monitoring as much as we can. It's certainly going to be interesting to see what we figure out, because amphibians are disappearing, and that is not going to be a good situation, because the less animals you have on Earth, the less diversity you have, the poorer off conditions are going to be. So I hope you guys enjoyed this presentation about amphibians. I don't mean to leave you on a downer, but certainly amphibians are kind of a environmental barometer to tell you how healthy the environment is. And if we don't have amphibians, or if they're declining, there's something that needs to be done. And if we can educate the general population about conservation, we'll be all the better.